On today's show, we'll discuss every major league team's bullpen situation with guest Greg Jewett of Reliever Recon and The Athletic. Fantasy baseball advice of who and how you should choose your closers for your upcoming fantasy drafts. My voice is a little hoarse for this episode, but hopefully the advice and information is still sound. So stay tuned. Beat the Shift is next. And welcome to another episode of the Beat the Shift podcast. I am your slightly hoarse-voiced host, Ariel Cohen, and with me, as always, is Ruvain Guy. How are you, Ruvain?
I'm doing great. How are you doing today?
Okay, other than I'm a little bit hoarse. I guess I was on a plane down to First Pitch, Florida, where we had the First Pitch conference and we had the mixed labor auction. So I guess I got a little bit of a little sore throat or so, but I'm feeling pretty good. How are you, Ruvain?
I'm doing well. I thought you were maybe cheering on the World Baseball Classic because that's in full swing and that's actually fun to watch.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Tonight, we had Team Israel, who I am rooting for, along with Team USA, of course, but rooting for Team Israel. And the kid who started today, Jacob Steinmetz, actually a local kid here, actually went to the same high school that my wife graduated from. I play with my center fielder on my softball team. He was the assistant coach of his high school baseball team, so we're very familiar with this guy, and pretty cool to see him. He had a 1-2-3 inning, and Team Israel's now up 9-0 in the ninth inning on the Washington Nationals. That's pretty cool.
That's cool, and he is a prospect right now in the Arizona Diamondback system.
That's right. All right, well, let's get right to the show. We've got a great guest today. We're going to be doing our relief pitcher preview episode. I won't talk that much since I'm a little bit hoarse, but this guy will. You know him from The Athletic and from many other places. Greg Jewett, Reliever Recon. Welcome. How you doing, Greg?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on, gentlemen.
All right, and by the way, thanks for beating me in Tout Wars in the playoffs this year. You knocked me out, so thanks.
Yeah, you and Clay Link, I just couldn't take down Frank.
Yeah. Well, but you had an amazing run. I mean, that week you had against me, I had my best week of the entire season, and you just completely clocked that. So kudos to you, and thanks for coming on the show anyways.
Of course, no. I got to know you well through the last couple of years, so it'll be fun to actually do the auction in person this year for Tout.
Yes, looking forward to seeing you and doing this live. We've been doing Tout Wars on the online for the last couple of years, but great to be back. All right, so let's get right to it. Closers. All right, pretty different than it has been in the past. I mean, I remember a couple of years ago, you get your closers, and there's plenty to go around, and roles are stable, and if it's not one guy, it's the next guy if he gets hurt, and so on and so forth. But we have a lot of different situations. We've got closer by committees. We've got two closers on a team. We've got some teams with lockdown closers. There's some teams that we don't even know who the closer is. Coach won't mention it. Even some teams like the Diamondbacks, there are 4 different guys. We have no idea how they're going to operate. So let's just start very generally, Greg. What is your general take on the closer let's talk closer landscape in baseball first.
Well, as you were intimating, last year actually 222 pitchers recorded a save. However, the number of pitchers getting 5, 10, 20 actually went down. The number of relievers getting 30 saves actually stayed stable, but the other numbers, so there's a lot of dispersal of these save situations with more and more teams moving towards a high leverage matchup situation where roles aren't necessarily defined by inning. It's more by the pocket of the lineup, and that's what's creating a lot of the frustration and confusion for the fantasy community, because we're kind of still latching on to the term closer, even though that actual position is kind of waning at the as you look around these teams. I mean, even the Mets were saying after Edwin Diaz signed his contract that part of the allure was the fact that he was willing to pitch the eighth inning against Atlanta in a couple of very important games because the best part of their lineup was coming up in the eighth. So they wanted him facing those guys rather than saving him for the ninth inning. And we see this more and more. I mean, the teams like Cleveland, where it's just, it's Emmanuel Clase in the ninth inning, are becoming the rarity, not the norm.
Yeah. Anything to add, Ruve?
No, nothing has really changed that much from prior years, except last year we had the whole lockout, and when drafting closers, everyone wanted to get a secure closer. And 2 years ago, coming off of COVID, no one really knew exactly what was going on and how everyone was going to bounce back. So there's more stability overall in general in baseball, which means there's more stability there in the closer role as well, just because going into drafting season, we have a better idea of who has a job and who doesn't have a job.
Yeah, it's hard to compare to what was going on last year in drafts because we had the lockout and we just didn't know where people were signing. We didn't know roles. Several closers didn't even have a job, right? So it's hard to assess where to pick them. So because of that, closers were pushed up because of the certainty of whoever did have a job on a team. So before we talk about the actual teams and strategy, the question to you, Greg, though, is if you had your choice of how to have the strategy last year, what would have been your optimal strategy? Meaning, if, going into knowing what how the closers shook out last year and how saves were distributed, would you have said, get the one lockdown closer and that would have been the strategy? Just take darts? Like what would have been the optimal strategy in hindsight?
When you look at how the teams in the top 25 did, of the top 25 teams in the main event, the most popular closer on those teams was Kenley Jansen. So it wasn't necessarily that you had to shop at the top end of the closer tier. It was more that you just had to have what we talked about last year is having an anchor, and you intimated it when you guys were both speaking a moment ago. So an anchor is a guy you think that is pretty secure in the primary save share, where this guy is going to get me 30 saves. I mean, that's what we're trying to hope for when we take that first one. Then after that, you can kind of adjust your draft strategy. So the optimal plan would have been letting somebody else take the Hader Hendricks picks and getting in there after, because Rizal Iglesias was actually going third last year in ADP. So after Rizal went, getting your first closer would have made sense as an optimal strategy. And then we recommended Daniel Bard during spring training about halfway. It was very condensed, but as it looked like he was going to get that role, that was definitely something we put out on Recon, and a lot of our subscribers were able to get Daniel Bard. So if you got your anchor, then you drafted Daniel Bard late. And another guy that we were hyping up last year very early was Ryan Helsley. You pick him up on the waiver wire, then you had your 2 or 3 closers a week right there. That, to me, that would have been the optimal. Get your anchor, get somebody late that you think has a pathway to those saves, and then make a good early in-season addition, and then you can kind of coast as opposed to chasing the saves all year in the fob.
Hey, would you consider Josh Hader to be a success last year? Like, if you picked Josh Hader where he went, was that a success, do you think?
Well, from a save standpoint, yes. I mean, he had a rough month, and he went through personal issues, and that's not something for me to speak about. There was stuff going on with his son being traded. I mean, you can take it. Now, I had 3 shares of Josh Hader last year in my teams. 2 teams came in second, and 1 team came in first. So it wasn't like having Hader on my roster was, going to put me at the bottom of the league. It just meant that I had to do a little more work. But of course, as we know that with that being my niche, it's kind of, anticipated that I can handle those rough waters.
And would you say that Rizal Iglesias was a success last year? Because he was, fantastic for the first half a year, and then he didn't save a game for like a month on the Angels, and then he got traded and no saves after that. Would you say that was a successful pick?
Yes and no. I mean, you can't put that one in black and white because he got traded. It's not his fault. He was no longer the closer. And actually, he pitched very well for Atlanta, but then he was in the eighth inning. Now, the nice thing about Atlanta is that they're, with Brian Snicker at the helm, is they're very traditional. So they kind of like their seventh, eighth, ninth with set roles. So that kind of insulates Iglesias this year. So from a save standpoint, it probably was not a success, but from a strategical one, it was. And I know what you're leading in with that.
What's the lead in over there?
You want to talk about Bednar?
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's do it now. Let's ask Ruvain first. Yeah, but I'm hinting there that if you have a closer that saves half a year and gets traded, question was that a successful pick? And of course, if you think that Bednar is going to get traded on the Pirates this year, is that a good pick? Even if he is completely fine for the first half of the year, what do you think, Ruvain?
I think it is a good pick. There's nothing wrong with getting those saves. Those saves are still banked. What about the
Hmm.
year when Shane Green was traded and he had all those saves in the beginning of the year for Detroit and he was traded to Atlanta? He had a bunch of saves, and it's not like when you get traded away you lose those saves. You're banking those saves, and a lot of times people you can get closers on the waiver wire all throughout the season, and if you can supplement that closer who's going to get traded, then it is considered a success. And I don't think Bednar is going to get traded either. He's still unless they get a boatload of stuff from him because he's still under team contract until 20 or team control until 2027. So the Pirates still have a lot of control with him left. I don't see a reason unless they get blown out of the water that he's going to get traded. There are other situations you may be concerned about closers being traded, but as for Bednar, I don't think that there's too much concern there.
Do you agree, Greg?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, last year the GM was on record saying that they learned their lesson from selling low on Clay Holmes. Not that trading Bednar would be selling low. However, from the team controls aspect, and not to mention that he's a local guy. I mean, he's very popular. I mean, trading one of your most popular assets in the middle of the season during which you're trying to tell people is a rebuild would not be a very good look. I mean, with all those years of control, and I would be willing to bet he would take a team-friendly contract buying out those arbitration in a year or two after. I mean, this is where the Pirates have to start being forward-thinking instead of getting into the trenches like they are with Brian Reynolds. You say, hey, you love it here. We love having you here. So we're going to give you this 5-year deal for this amount of money. And I think Bednar would sign it tomorrow.
Very interesting. I've had the opposite take on him. That not that you shouldn't roster him, but that I would just ding him a little bit for the possibility of being traded. Certainly in a shallow league, there's no concern because waivers are more easily available. But if you're in a deep league, a mono league, or a deep mixed league, not that you shouldn't get him, but I ding him a couple of dollars because of the fear of it's only half season worth of saves, and then you're not going to be rostering the guy. I mean, I guess you could as a middle reliever, but you would only want him really as a closer.
But you also don't know what situation. We also don't know what situation he's being traded into. He's going to be in a Rafael Iglesias situation where he's going to pitch the eighth inning, or he's going to a team in the playoff hunt that needs a closer because their closer went down because of injury. So just because they get traded doesn't necessarily mean they're going to lose their jobs.
Yep, that's also true. Of course, the probability is not certain that if he's traded there, but it's all a probability, right? There's some percentage chance that he won't be a closer, and there's also injury. There's a lot of things that go into it. All right, so Greg, you said that last year's optimal strategy would have been to get your anchor and then to get some guys late. Does that apply this year? Is that really the way to go, in your opinion, for 2023 closers?
Again, everyone has to play to their strength, but I am still an advocate of it. Again, I don't think you have to necessarily get Edwin Diaz or Emmanuel Clase. And now this year it's Hader is usually the third reliever, at least in NFBC drafts, not necessarily in the other public leagues. But once Hader goes, you'll see a little bit of like a 9 or 10 pick lull, and then there's going to be a closer run. So hopefully you're in the middle of the draft, so when that closer run happens, in my most recent draft, I was not. I was picking at the wheel, and I thought about taking a closer at the one point, and I didn't, and then I just watched the queue disappear. So if you... Now, again, I'm not scared to roster saves in season, so it's not like if I don't get one, my build is going to collapse. But if you don't like doing that, or saves is your weakest point, then yes, make it a point of emphasis that at this point I want to try and identify the person at the bottom of that you're comfortable having, and then if that run happens, you might just have to reach a little bit, but at least you're getting somebody that you're comfortable with as your anchor, and then you're not forced to overpay as the draft continues. There's waves in those clusters where there's a rush of closers and then there's a lull, and you'll start seeing that lull again around pick 150 to 200. I think only 2 closers were going in OCs last month. So, I mean, it's just a matter of what you want to do and how you approach it. But when you get into that range, you're talking about the guys that are sharing saves, not necessarily people that are going to be getting them for 75% of the time on their team.
Do you think it's prohibitive to roster a closer in the second, third, fourth round? And, I say this because closers don't usually return their value or anywhere near it. They're only going expensive because of the safety of having a player that is more likely to, it's my job. I'm getting the saves, whereas a lot of teams you have closer committee. So it's the safety. That's why they're going earlier, I would presume, or the more certainty, I would say. But do you think it's cost prohibitive? Because, in the second round, you're skipping out on some major people. You're skipping out on, a Rafael Devers, or third round, you're skipping out on a Sandy Alcantara, or it's just you're passing up on so many really good players who are going to earn closer to their true value. Do you think it's prohibitive to buy a closer that early?
It's not prohibitive, but at the same token, if you do that, then you really need to wait, because now you've got to amass those innings and plate appearances that you're sacrificing in those rounds that you're speaking of in the second, third, or fourth. So again, and the template last year was, again, we were talking about how Clase was going after the guys at the top, Jansen, and in that realm. So, I mean, guys that were going in the 6th and 7th were still giving you 30 saves. They don't necessarily have the strikeout potential that some of those guys at the top have. However, you can still get those in a round or two later, especially if you're trying to get that really foundation to your build, and then you're going to start branching out to the other things.
Do you agree, Ruvain? I mean, you've been a proponent on this podcast of not doing that. And I just took I took Edwin Diaz in the third round of TGFBI. So for some reason I didn't think I would actually do that, but I did. It just viewing the options and when I wanted to get certain players, it just was the right build for me at that time. What do you think? Are you against that?
I am against it. I don't want to leave so much value on the table. I want to get my base for my whole team. Getting a closer doesn't get you a base for a whole team. If you get an offensive player, you're going to get a base for 4, maybe 5 categories. And I think when you're building your team, you're not going to get that same type of value later on. You can get a closer later on. In the same TGFBI, I waited until I think it was the 5th round or the end of the 4th round, beginning of the 5th round to get a Ryan Helsley, because I don't want to overpay for that. And I was a proponent last year for it. And if you want to play in the top tier of closers, that's fine, but I prefer to play in the bottom part of the top tier that's out of the first 3 or 4 rounds, so that you're able to get the value that you need to and still be able to get the closer that you want. Now, at the same point, I think that it is important to have one of those top guys, just because you need to have that anchor and you don't want to overpay for that anchor. And I think going the first couple rounds is overpaying, and I just can't stomach a guy. I'd rather have 3 or 4 darts at the end and hope that they hit, because there's so many closers by committee that there's a good chance that it's a coin flip for a lot of these players that you think they're going to actually close.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think Edwin Diaz, though, is a little bit of a unicorn because of all the strikeouts. You're getting essentially like a 4th starter almost in terms of strikeouts over there. But yeah, I agree. And I also think that, to me, it's easier in an auction to get one of these top closers because you can then distribute the money differently. In a draft, it's either or. You're either taking, Clase or a prospective third round. You can't get both. So I think it's more prohibitive in a draft. In an auction, I'm more inclined to take a top closer. Want to ask you, though, Greg, darts at the bottom. You have a lot of guesses, either one of the Arizona guys or even like the Dodger guys. Dodgers are a good team, and maybe they split this. Maybe they split everything. Maybe they they end up with one person as the closer. But either way, Dodgers guys are cheap, and they're going late. They're cheap, and could be a lot of save potential there. What's your take on darts this year? And if you are going to throw a cheap dart, what is the best way to throw it? On a better team or on a guy who's more likely to be the guy on a team?
I think the team concept is important, not just from a projected win standpoint. From also you're including the manager's tendencies. Dave Roberts has said he's not scared to play the matchup game, but a lot of the quotes that you're reading either from Roberts or from the general manager, and as this is evolving, it sounds like they're going to try Hudson a lot of times in the ninth inning early, but when Alex Reyes is ready to return, if they can improve his command, then he's going to be a part of that as well. I just want to tell people to temper their expectations a little bit. I mean, Evan Phillips had an unbelievable year last year, but he's very valuable in what I label as the highest leverage reliever, which means, he, Andres Munoz, and other relievers, when it's the best part of the lineup, they're the guys that are in there, whether it's the seventh, the eighth, or the ninth inning. They're not married or tethered to one inning. It's they're lined up to match up with the best part of the other team's batting order in those biggest situations to help the team win. They're more there for the win probability added than they are to get a save. And you just have to bake that into your expectations. So if you're taking Evan Phillips based on his low whip last year of 0.76 and his new arsenal, providing more strikeouts, if you're drafting him thinking you're going to get 15 to 20 saves, then you're going to be disappointed, possibly. Now, I'm not saying he can't achieve that. I'm just saying that the way the team is built, that they're going to keep him in what they'll call, like I said, the HLR or a fireman role, where he's going to go in where it's the best situation. So you're baking all that into a little pot. So the Cubs last year said they were going to do that, but then when David Robertson was there, he was kind of the primary guy. Unless he needed a day off, then other people would fill in. So past usage patterns usually gives you a little predictor of the future. So the hard part is right now is we got new managers in a bunch of spots, so we just don't know how they can say one thing and do another in the season, which people have taught us. So we don't know how Griffel's going to handle the bullpen in Chicago for the White Sox with Hendricks out. We don't necessarily know how Quintaro is going to use the bullpen in Kansas City. He came from Tampa Bay, so is he going to go to the more matchup mode, and will that hurt Scott Barlow? So there's a lot of ancillary factors that go into these things. So if you're shooting darts in those team, take one, and then if your dart is not the guy, you can switch them in a league where there's free agency acquisition. It's tougher to do that in a draft and hold, because you don't want to throw 4 darts at the Arizona bullpen, then it's option 5, then you're left holding the bag.
Is it worthwhile to do a handcuff situation for a lot of these situations, or is it just better to get one dart on one team and another dart on another team?
It's really going to depend on how many spots are on your bench. Like if your league has IL spots, then you can take a chance with the Dodgers. You can get Hudson and Reyes and put them on the IL when the season starts, and then as they come back, you see how they're used, and if they're being, if Hudson's being used early on for save situations, you can get him in there. All of the league concept makes a big difference. Like in a draft and hold, I don't want to be taking 3 to 4 guys from one team because I'm chewing up a lot of bench space just for one shot at a closer, if that makes sense. I don't want to be throwing darts all over the place. If I'm going to shoot a dart in Arizona, I'll pick one guy, and then if I hit it, that's great, and if not, I'm not tying up bench space with that person. Again, it's a lot easier in leagues with waivers or free agent acquisition than it is in the draft and hold formats. So, and I don't think that's where a majority of people play. So again, you can be smart and you can try and get the handcuff, and that's okay. But just remember, like the Red situation in 2020, somebody would get a save, everyone added them on Sunday, and then on Monday somebody else got the save. So you were always chasing last week and not the saves that are coming down the road. You don't want to get into a situation where you're playing closer whack-a-mole and you're always on the wrong one.
Well, what do you think of some of the unsettled bullpens? Let's say in Seattle, for example, we have Munoz and Sewald. The problem I see with rostering some of those guys, or even both, if you want to play this handcuff deal, is that they're very expensive. Like if you're going to guess wrong, you're shelling out a high cost. Whereas if you pick, Evan Phillips and you're wrong, or Hudson, you're wrong. It's a low pick. Any thoughts on those? How about like the Twins, Johan Duran, Jorge Lopez? If Duran is just the high leverage reliever and only gets the third of the share of saves, well, you're spending a very large amount of money on him. Is it worth rostering both guys on those types of teams? Is it too high a cost to get both? What are your thoughts on some of those expensive ones?
I think it's bill dependent. So like if I get Jordan Romano as my anchor, he's not a high strikeout guy, so I might want a Munoz or Duran as we'll put it in quotation marks, as a half closer. So I'm hoping they'll give me 10 to 13 saves, but they're also going to rack up strikeouts, which will help me out with Romano. And then at the end, I can get a couple of darts. So then I'm not doing the big spec game with all of the other things. But on the flip side, if I have Felix Bautista and I'm a little nervous, maybe he'll miss the first week or two of the season, then I might wait a little bit and get Jorge Lopez where he's going in the Twins situation, just because he's the least expensive as far as draft capital of the teams you're mentioning. And he still might get 15 to 18 saves, just because we know the Twins depress arbitration salaries. And so Duran's young. I think he'll just be entering his arbitration window. So they're not going to give him a busload of saves unless they have to, because they don't want to pay him. That's just been their modus operandi through the years. Weigh all of those things. The build really matters, how you're adding that second and third reliever option. It's not just I'm getting this, that, and the other. It's because I got A, and now I'm looking at B, if that makes sense.
Oh, gotcha. And what do you think about a strategy where you would say, just get one closer and save a lot of fab capital for closers? So, I'm going to budget $400 out of $1,000 on closers. I'll cheap out in the auction. I'll get one, right? But the other one I won't spend any high pick on. Is that an effective use of capital? Like, spending $400, or you tell me what is a good amount that you can allocate and reasonably be assured to get, some kind of good share of saves on the waiver wire?
Well, if you're going to do that, you just got to try and make sure you're adding the guy the week before he gets that first save. So like those who added Helsley before he got his first save were able to get him in a much more palatable fab bid than after. Once those saves happens, then you're paying. We joke about it like in the NFBC. That's the Sunday save tax. A guy gets a save on Sunday, and all of a sudden on Sunday night, everyone has to up their bids for that reliever percentage because that happened. It's hard to say that because it's okay. I'm gonna save $400 of my $1,000 in fab for closers, and then one of my top starters gets hurt. One of my best starting pitchers. Now I got to overspend and make sure I get the best option on the wire, or when this hot prospect comes up, or Andrew Painter comes back and his elbow's okay in June. I want to get him on my roster because I need to fill that other thing. I don't want to say I'm going to spend this amount on chasing saves because other fires might happen and then you're scrambling.
Gotcha. All right, before we go on, it's time for the Injury Gurus Trivia of the Week.
Well, now we're going to start talking a little bit more about middle relievers and is it worthwhile drafting middle relievers. So I was looking up some stats from last year. So I'm going to give two multiple choice questions. Question number 1. How many relief pitchers last year had between 5 and 10 saves? Last year, how many relief pitchers had between 5 and 10 saves? Was it 21, 31, 41, or 51 players?
Are you saying only 5 to 10?
Only between 5 and 10 saves.
I'll guess 41.
I would go with the 31.
Ding, ding, ding. 31 relievers had between 5 and 10 saves last year. And how many relief pitchers with 50-plus appearances had 7 or more wins? Was it 10, 15, 20, or 25?
I mean, Helsley was the unicorn on that one. I'm going with the low number on that one.
I'll pick the second lowest.
The second lowest was 15, and that's correct. There were 15 relief pitchers that had 7 or more wins. So is it worthwhile to draft these middle relievers if you know you could vulture a save or two and vulture a bunch of wins, especially in today's day and age when starting pitchers don't go that far?
It can be. And, if we're trying to just conceptualize how we're going to handle saves and relievers and whatever, in a 12-team league, if you're thinking about maybe, let's just put let's just put a decent number out there. So 70 saves, that's usually going to keep you really competitive in your league. You don't necessarily, you don't have to win your league in saves with 96 or some ridiculous number. The top teams in the OCs last year did not do that sort of a thing. 70 keeps you very competitive, so that gives you the availability. So if I have a very good anchor and he's getting me my 30, and then I'm doing other stuff in the year, I can have an Andres Munoz available. So if he's scooping up vulture wins because the Mariners are tied in the 8th inning and he starts racking them up, then he becomes very valuable. We're not too far removed from how people were paying a pretty good draft capital for Chad Green not too long ago before his injury. There's no reason Michael King can't replicate what he did in that season. So, these are the little things, and especially in deeper formats or mono leagues, that become very important, because I'd rather have Michael King going in a week than some guy getting a two-step that gets blown up and kills my ratios. So you have a very good point there, and it's just a matter of making sure that you don't ignore saves, but that's why guys like Munoz and Duran are valuable even at their price points, because they can give you wins, they can give you saves, and they're giving you strikeouts, and they're protecting your ratios. So they're still viable from a fantasy standpoint.
Yeah, so I think that for guys who have the potential to get a save share, like let's say Brusdar Gratterall, sure. I mean, that's definitely worth a low dart. But I think the question, or I'll answer the question as if Ruvain's asking, is it worth rostering middle relievers who you don't expect to get saves? The answer is it's worth rostering, but I think the answer is it is not worthwhile to pay a draft capital. Like paying $5 at the auction for Chad Green the other year was not worth it. I think that you're better off waiting, seeing who the reliever is in the first 2 weeks that makes a lot of sense, who's got that high K-BB in the first 2 weeks, and grabbing those guys and playing those guys instead of a 7th, 8th starter on weeks where you sort of need it, where the matchups aren't great for your pitching staff. I think playing the middle reliever is a great idea, but I would not spend any draft capital on it. Your last reserve pick, second to last reserve pick, sure. But I wouldn't waste a lot of time. And you know what? Middle relievers are not fantastically sticky year to year. I think that you very often can see in season who the guys are good in season. It doesn't exactly translate year to year, and so I wouldn't pay any kind of price for that at all.
So would you rather draft an Adam Wainwright in, let's say, round 27 to 30, or would you rather pick a middle reliever that you know is a consistent, like, let's say, I don't know, I'll throw out an Aaron Bummer, who has had a couple of seasons, or a Josh Stamount, who has proven before that he can strike out a lot of people? Would you rather have him, or do you rather pick an Adam Wainwright?
Well, I don't particularly like Adam Wainwright for this year, but in terms of that kind of concept, I would rather choose the Wainwright, because the middle relievers should be free on the waiver wire any week in a mixed league, even in a 15-team mixed league. If you're in a mono league, that's something different. Then I would go for the reliever. But in a mixed league, no, I just take the free commodity. And if the starter is somewhat usable, you can use them even every other week at the very bottom on your bench for a start. I think that's a much better play. Let's go around the league and talk about some closer situations, some bullpens, and get Greg and Ruvain's take on what you would do with that situation, who's the guy, so on and so forth. So I'm just going to read a couple of names out. Let's start with the stable situations. You tell me, guys, if you tell me if you think that yes, it's one guy only. Yes, totally pay the draft price because they're going to get those saves almost assuredly unless injured. All right, Felix Bautista, agree?
Yes, I love the mountain.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, but early in the season he may start off a little slow because he does have some knee soreness and shoulder soreness. So just something to watch early in the season. But yes,
Yeah, they're saying he's targeting mid-March to start ramping up activities. So he has been throwing, yes, but I love him. Just make sure you plan on you might miss a week or two at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, I think we're fine with that kind of thing. And he has a walk-up song.
Oh, the whistle's awesome. Yes.
Yeah, guys who have walk-up songs, that's the guy. That's what it is.
But
They
they're cracking down on this. Remember, they have certain time period to get warm-ups, which is why Buck Showalter said they want to keep the music going and then stick Edwin Diaz in a cart and have him, get the bullpen cart there because they're not going to have time for the work for those songs. They're cutting out the times. Remember.
Yeah, if you think that Major League Baseball is going to make a better product by kicking out Narco and the trumpet, Timmy Trumpet with Diaz, and that's going to make a better product, no way. I mean, there's no way baseball is going to do that. That would be very, very, very bad. Then fans and everybody will jump all over that really quickly. So I don't think that's going to happen. All right, back to the guys. Clay Holmes, is he the guy?
He's the guy. However, the Yankees, like the Mets, have said so. If Bo Bichette and Vlad Guerrero Jr. are going to bat in the eighth inning, you're probably going to see Clay Holmes because he's very good against right-handed batters, and that's going to be the point where they need him the most. So he's the primary save share. However, I don't think he will get every save exclusively, if that makes sense.
Are we talking
Yes.
like greater than 80% for Holmes specifically?
Yes. Yes.
With health, yes.
Okay.
Just you just have to understand that that will happen at times.
Kenley Jansen.
He's good as long as he's healthy, but I'm sure Ruvain will back me up on this. You should just plan on at least one stint on the IL.
Yes. Because he's getting up there in age, you can't bank on a full healthy season from him.
Jordan Romano of Toronto.
Yes, Romano's their guy.
Okay. Clase?
Agreed.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, he's the guy almost more than anybody as far as exclusivity.
And Ryan Presley of Houston.
Same as Jansen, he's their guy. Just bake in at least one stint on the IL.
Yeah, and Rafael Montero is the guy. Like, if you're in a deep league, I really like Montero. He got a lot of saves last year. I think he got like 14 saves almost.
13, yeah.
13, okay. I was close.
Yep.
Jose Leclerc, I mean, he's going later in draft, but to me, I think he's easily the guy. What do you think?
I'm not sold he's the guy just because they brought in Will Smith. I don't think we can overlook Will Smith's attachment with Bruce Bochy. It's not that Will Smith is a great reliever, but he's only one season removed from over 30 saves with Atlanta. I just think I'm nervous about Leclerc just being viewed as the guy. He should open the year as the guy, but I think if he goes through any sort of command troubles or a couple of blown saves in a row, that I think Bochy will quickly move to somebody else. I'm nervous about how that'll play out.
And the last time Will Smith was on a Bruce Bochy team, he was the closer there. So that's something. And also, Jose Leclerc is in a contract year. This is his last year of his contract. There's a good chance that the Rangers are out of it. He may be a guy that's traded.
All right, so I think that's a situation maybe to watch and put your thumb on the pick up Will Smith button. Be ready to press that, I guess. Raisel Iglesias. Now, he really didn't get any saves in Atlanta, but we presume he's the guy. Is that so?
Yeah, I'm not absolutely. That, like I said, that's one of the most stable bullpen situations with Brian Snitker at the helm. As long as Iglesias is healthy, he's the guy. I mean, he could easily get 35 saves this year. Remember, Iglesias was being taken third among relievers last year.
Right.
In the preseason. Right. So, I mean, it's not like he became a bad pitcher, and he actually used his changeup more, which increased his strikeout rate when he joined Atlanta. So that's something to keep an eye on.
All right, what about Kyle Finnegan of Washington? I don't really see too many. I mean, Hunter Harvey, yeah. Finnegan, is he the guy?
He'll be the guy at the open of the season, but I'd be shocked if Washington doesn't trade him at some point.
Okay, is that a situation to buy or stay away, or what do you think?
Stay away. Stay away.
Okay.
Yeah, I just don't see a lot of saves accumulating there. I'd rather let somebody else take them. I'll take somebody else later.
Okay, let's go to Edwin Diaz, and that's a slam dunk, right?
Yeah, he's the guy. Just like we said, there'll be a couple of times if they're fighting with Atlanta, they'll use him in the 8th inning. Don't panic.
What about Williams in Milwaukee? Devin Williams.
He's the guy. I'm just curious because he's never been the guy. He's always been Robin to haters Batman. I'm just curious how he will handle that situation. He's always been a very good. We've always said if he's a reliever or a closer, he'll be a top 5 guy. Well, now we're going to find out because I've seen more than one person put that on Twitter or in articles. So we'll just see. Right. Again, I think he's the guy. We're just waiting to see how he does under the spotlight.
Same stadium. He's not changing teams or situations, and nope. He's a lot of strikeouts with Williams. So should be good either way. David Bednar, we talked a little bit about. I presume he's the guy. My worry is that he's going to be traded, but Greg, you say that he's a fine pick, right?
I'm very, very okay with where he is.
Okay. Ryan Helsley. Now, Helsley to me is not the guy. To me, he's like a 70% save share. You got Gallegos getting a bunch. Is that how you see it?
In the second half last year, Gallegos had over 80% games finished rate. He kind of took that over from Gallegos. I'm not too worried. I don't know how Rouvain feels, but I think Helsley's the guy there.
Yeah, I think Helsley is the guy there. I think he'll get close to 80%, but on my TGFBI team, I drafted both of them because Gallegos is a valuable reliever.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely.
And that's not a bad handcuff because that's just cheap at the very end. What the heck? If you see that Helsley's getting all the saves, then you drop Gallegos and no problem. Daniel Bard. Now I know I've heard you talk that you don't believe in him this year, but he seems to be the guy after doing it 2 years ago. Why would they say, you know what, we'll go to somebody else to start?
Oh, I'm not saying Colorado's going to name somebody else a closer. I'm saying, Rick Wolf and Glenn Colton have made a career of not paying for a career year. And that's what you're doing if you take Bard at his price point right now. I don't see the ERA or the WHIP staying at the same point. And, there was an interview and he's 30, he's going to be 38 this year. And he said with the pitch clock, it's like a cardio workout. And he's pitching in Coors half his games. If he's feeling winded in spring from the pitch clock, what's he going to be feeling like in Coors? And he's in the WBC now, so he's not going to be pitching for the next week or so with the pitch clock. So I'm just nervous of him not being able to hit his projections, if that makes sense.
Totally. No, listen, he's a crappier closer, to put to use a very rudimentary word. Not a low value closer, but he's the guy for now. All right. What about Josh Hader? Any reason to suspect he's not? I mean, they traded for him.
Yeah, no, I'm not worried about him. You can't quantify what it's like when you're pitching for a contract, but he's a free agent at the end of the season. And like Edwin Diaz last year, I think he'll be very motivated to put forth his best effort and have a great year so he gets a nice paycheck at the end of the season.
Camilo Doval in San Francisco.
I liked him adding the sinker in the second half. It really helped him out. I think he needs to use his cutter less. And they added Taylor Rogers, which helps because if there's a heavy left-handed pocket of the lineup in the ninth inning, Taylor Rogers can pitch to it instead of Camilo Doval, so that should help him. I don't mind Doval. I would just say plan on like 25 to 27 saves like last year, not him graduating to the 30-plus role.
That's fair. They got both Rogers. They got both the Twins on the same team. Is that amazing?
Yeah, and if they pitch in the same game, they can both get holds. That's which is interesting.
Yes, very, very cool. Here, talk about brothers. What about Alexis Diaz? Is he the guy? Cincinnati's been doing a little bit of committee last couple of years, but he actually stood out last year pretty well, and the name has a pedigree already. What do you think?
Yeah, Trent Rosencrantz kind of put David Bell's feet to the fire, and Bell said, yes, he's our closer, with shades of gray saying that, if we need him sometimes in the eighth inning, he'll be there. But, if you take him, Cincinnati's not going to be very good this year. But if you get 20 saves from him, then I think you're getting exactly what you signed up for.
Sure. And the price is commiserate.
Would you rather have the Colorado closer or the Cincinnati Reds closer?
I'd rather go with the youth. I'll take the Reds closer in this situation. Two bad teams. I'll take the better strikeouts from Diaz.
Yep, I agree. All right, let's talk about a couple of situations that are more split and could be more costly. Tampa Bay. This always is interesting because Tampa Bay is known to have like around 28 different, even though the roster is only 26, they have 28 people getting saves. I don't know how that happens. No, I'm kidding. But they have like 13 or 14, literally 13 or 14 guys. Even in the 2020 season, there were 60 games in the year, and they had 13 different people closing games. That's hard to do. But they gave some money to Peter Fairbanks. I like Jason Adam. I think he's really outstanding. Is it worth rostering multiple people? Is Fairbanks worth the cost, even though he might get 60% of the saves? I mean, I don't think you can ever get a Tampa guy get more than about 60% of the saves. Like, it may be less than that, but I think that's like a cap. Any thoughts on Tampa?
I do like Pete Fairbanks, and I do like the fact that they gave him the contract because he doesn't have to worry about arbitration keeping him from save situations. And I do like your point about Jason Adam, like where he's going in current ADP is kind of criminal because he can still get you 10 saves. He's going to pick you up vulture wins, and he's going to protect your ratios and give you strikeouts. So he's like that guy you're almost talking about, past round 20, where he's worth targeting because, and if you pair him with Fairbanks, it's not bad because again, you're getting very good ratios, and you're not having to worry about if something happens to Fairbanks, because he does have a pretty checkered injury past. But he really changed his arsenal with the Rays, and it unlocked the door to a new level of production. But I'm okay with either one of these guys personally.
Ruvain, do you agree on the cost of Fairbanks? I'm just worried that there's a cap.
Well, his cost is it's escalating fast. Like in my TGFBI,
I know.
he went in the 9th round.
Yeah.
So, and anyone thinking they're getting him at pick 200, those days are over.
That's a little too high, but if you want to go for the same type of handcuff, these two guys together, I mean, their ratios are very good. I mean, if you want a good middle reliever who may vulture some saves and may save for like 3 straight weeks and then be taken off closer job because that's what the Rays do, then Adam is great for this, and he's right now he's still relatively cheap.
Yeah, I just bought him in labor on Sunday in the auction. My very last pick, $1, Jason Adam. Why not? I mean, I already had saves in the team, but I don't know, great ratios, 10 more saves. I'll take them for $1. All right, what about the Duran Lopez situation? I find myself trying to buy Duran because the market premium that I see for saves. And I think that Duran has a chance to getting more than half the saves. I don't think Lopez is really that good. Like, even though I know that you might say, well, they want to milk the arbitration system, so they want to give more saves to Lopez. But Lopez really isn't all that good. And at some point, they gotta trust Duran and just say, all right, just go with the 9th. So whether it happens early on, whether it happens half the way in the season, barring injury, I think Duran's going to get a very large percentage of the save share. And if you look at what his value is, it's so much higher than what he's going for in terms of in the draft. So I kind of like that situation. And if you want to take Lopez as the handcuff, Lopez is almost free in mixed leagues. So to me, that's a great situation. What do you think?
I mean, it's pretty easy to identify Duran's the best arm in that bullpen. We just don't know how he's going to be deployed in season. I mean, so if Lopez flames out, what if they keep Duran as the HLR and just elevate Griffin Jackson to the 9th inning? I mean, there's no telling what Baldelli's going to do. That's the only downside to any of this. There's no downside in Duran and his stuff. And he did have a pretty long injury history in the minors. So again, he came out flaming at 101 miles an hour, where all of the veterans are kind of taking it easy and ramping up. You're seeing all the veterans coming in at 2.5 miles per hour below what they started out with last year, but they have a full 4-week period to ramp up their velocity. Again, I love Duran. I was on him, I believe, last year ahead of many people. I hyped him up in my early athletic articles. I just don't know how Minnesota is going to handle it. I mean, you can take him. You just have to be prepared that they keep him in that HLR role. That's the only downside to any of this. Is just how the team uses him because he is their best reliever.
And Baldelli is also a disciple of Tampa Bay. So he has the same mentality where Tampa's coming from. So he's done this before. He knows the whole situation. In TGFBL, I actually drafted Duran, and I didn't go after Lopez because I don't want two in the same situation. I'd rather have just the better pitcher overall because the better pitcher will either get the higher leverage and or the saves, and that's what I want.
And you're saying in that, then you have Helsley and Duran. That's fantastic. Then you just take a couple of late darts and you can add saves in season. I mean,
that was exactly what I did, which is why I took Gallegos because Gallegos was a good handoff, I took some darts later on also, and just in case they hit, I don't need to surf the fab wire to get closers later in the season. Hopefully.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. That Duran as the number one probably doesn't work for you, but as the number two, it probably works very well.
Yes, as a second reliever with upside, he's fantastic. Yes,
right. Question. You mentioned being on the pulse for the guy a week before he actually gets the save. How would we spot Griffin Jacks? Like, just to take him for example, because he came up here in Minnesota situation. How do we spot that he's the guy a week before? How does that work?
If he's pitching in high leverage situations and Lopez is floundering, and the team is not saying that Duran's going to be our guy, then you can just take that speculative dart. You hold on to him for a week, and then if they don't elevate him, you can move on, but you're doing it at like a $2 bid as opposed to you wait the extra week to see what happens. Okay, he gets a save on Monday, so now the week after he's going to be going for $75 bids. That's what I'm saying you're trying to avoid.
No, totally understand. My question to you though is, as advice to our listeners here, what are we looking for? Are we looking for leverage index on Fangraphs? Yeah.
Yep, I use the WPA, I use the leverage index, and I look at the innings on Baseball Reference and the game logs that they're being used. So if they're, if they're not in the ninth, but they're in those high leverage situations before it gets to Duran, it's possible that he will leapfrog just because they want to keep Duran in that role.
And a follow-up question to that is, with the change of the rules with no shift, is it more worthwhile to get a reliever that's more prone to get a strikeout, and they'll put the more higher K per nine pitchers in the ninth inning or in the save situation, just because there's a better chance of them striking them out as opposed to having to hope there's a ground ball hit into the shift?
It should, and we'll, hopefully we can figure that out in the first month if teams are changing how they're structuring that late end situation. And that's something that helps Munoz because he's on a very, very team friendly contract, and he's their best strikeout arm. So if Seattle decides that they don't want balls in play in the ninth inning and they're going to go to him more, that's just a situation where they could start to elevate him as the season progresses into more save situations. And again, like I said, if you look at his contract, it's criminal.
I mean, talking about the Seattle situation with Sewell, Munoz, both of those are going for actually very costly in drafts. Is either of them working in terms of the price? Because you're getting half the saves and you're still paying a full closer price, right?
Yeah, it's the same idea. You're taking them as a second closer, not your first. Either one of them as a second closer is okay. If you need strikeouts, you're taking Munoz. If you're looking for more saves, you're taking Sewald.
Okay. Kansas City, is Barlow the guy, or does Aroldis Chapman stand a chance? New situation, new manager, so who the heck knows? But what's your best guess?
I was off of Chapman last year, so I don't think he's going to suddenly become what he used to be this year. I still think Barlow's the guy, but I think they're going to share more than people want to happen.
Barlow was a top 10 reliever last year. 24 saves. He was worth more than what people paid for him. Is that going to repeat? Is he a good value this year?
Now, see, Barlow is more likely to be traded than Bednar just because of the arbitration, and you've seen that Kansas City is going to turn over the roster during this rebuild. This is the last chance they have to trade Barlow in his arbitration thing. I have a hard time believing that they're not gonna move him this summer.
And if you saw the way Chapman pitched last year, you don't want anything to do with him. I mean, he was really, really bad last year.
Yeah, that's right. All right, no, good, great advice on the Kansas City versus Pittsburgh. Very eye-opening. All right, let's talk about a bunch of situations where just absolutely uncertain for many reasons. And maybe the advice that you have, Greg, is don't buy anybody. Unless somebody puts a gun to your face and says you got to buy somebody, or you're in a very deep mono league. But let's start with Detroit. Actually, I kind of like this situation because it looks like there's nobody there but Lang. Lang has shown really good strikeout rate. Walks are a little bit of a problem for him, but that was Gregory Soto the last couple of years, and he seemed to get a lot of saves. So is Lang the guy? Is this an uncertain situation, or are you fully confident and pay for Lang? Because he's pretty cheap. He's going actually really cheap in drafts.
Yeah, he had like a surge, but now he's settled back in at a more palatable price point. I'm okay with Lang. It's just what's Detroit going to do as their season progresses as well. And I do like that Hinch has kind of protected him instead of putting pressure on Lang, because I think he's only 27. Instead of coming out and saying Lang's my guy, he's doing the whole thing where he's making him earn it, but he's got the best swing and miss stuff in there. I mean, yeah, they could give a few early saves to Jose Cisnero just because he's an expiring free agent at the end of the season if they want to try and build any trade value, but you're not going to get much for Cisnero anyway. So I'm okay with Lang. Again, same deal, just like Diaz. Just if you get Lang, just plan on strikeouts, a little bit higher whip, and probably 20 saves. If you get more than 20, then it's gravy.
And as your second closer or your third closer.
Correct, yeah. Second or third, yeah. No, it can't be your primary, yeah.
Right. Ruvain, let's go to you first with the Chicago White Sox. And Liam Hendricks, why don't you update on his health situation and, tell everyone what he has and how it will affect him, how he pitches. And when do you think he'll come to return? And maybe will he be the guy upon return?
Well, I think he'll be the guy when he comes back, but the question is when he's going to come back, because he is battling cancer, and that is a big deal, and that zaps your ability to have stability and stamina throughout the entire course of the season. So even when he comes back, they may ease him back in. So you can't really draft him at this point. You may be able to pick him up later if you hear news that he's starting to ramp up, or he's starting to get going, or he's getting better. It's possible that he could close toward the end of the season, but I think Graveman is the guy because he has history of closing. He closed with the A's in the past. Reynaldo Lopez, though, is very, very interesting because he has the ability. He has closer stuff, and he may overtake Graveman before the season's over.
I just picked Graveman in TGFBI in like the 25th round. I thought that was a pretty good price for get some saves in the beginning of the year. Dart. What's your take in the bullpen? Is it Graveman or Lopez? Should you roster any of them, Greg?
I'm Team Lopez, but that's because Graveman's inflated whip in the second half last year. It was, I believe, almost 1.5. I'm just nervous. Graveman did get some saves when he was with Seattle. I just don't know that he's the best reliever in that bullpen. I agree with Ruvain that Lopez has the best stuff for being a closer, and he had a 0.81 whip. If his slider is acting more like a slider and less like a cutter, that will give him a little bit better strikeout potential. So I would rather take a chance with him. And in a mono league, it can't hurt having Bummer, as you alluded to earlier. As long as he's healthy, he could be a very sneaky. He'll just get you like 5 saves, but he'll get you strikeouts and some other things too, the deeper the format.
Yeah, so I picked him at something like around 375. Graveman. I mean, I wasn't even expecting to get him, but pick 375. Lopez was gone way before. All right, I'll take a shot on somebody. Carlos Estevez in the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. Is that what they're called? I mean, he was brought in. Seems to be the most likely guy. We haven't heard anything exactly, or have we? What's your take on that bullpen situation?
Well, they said he would have to earn it. I mean, they kind of gave him that, he's being paid to be a high leverage pitcher. But then his first 2 outings were just horrible in spring. So we don't know if he was overthrowing. Nevin said he was trying to work up in the strike zone. They were trying to get him to throw his four-seam fastball higher. I mean, we don't know how these things go. Sometimes a pitcher's working on a pitch, and if he doesn't have the feel for it, it just goes sideways fast. I think he will open the year as the primary save share, but if he's struggling early on, I think we could see Ben Joyce get up sooner rather than later. I just have to tell everyone to temper their expectations because Joyce only appeared once on back-to-back days last year. He did it with Tennessee. He did not do it when he was at Double-A. Now, Double-A was only a 13-game sample, but we just have to see if he's durable enough to handle back-to-back situations, because that's required if you're going to be a closer on a team. So it's okay to start with Estevez. Those in dynasty leagues, though, if Joyce is somehow still available, you probably want to stash him for down the road.
Worth the cost, Ruben?
No, I think this whole situation is a situation you stay away from. Estevez has not pitched well in the spring, and talking about another closer situation in Arizona, Mark Melancon has looked even worse in spring. He's been so bad, and that's another situation where, you know what, sometimes you're better off just going with a better middle reliever on a better team than to blow up your ERA and WHIP and have a quote-unquote closer on one of these teams.
Yeah, I think I got a phone call from the Diamondbacks needing a pitcher. I don't know what was about. But Mantiply, Chafin, Ginkel, Melancon, I feel like, I'm sure the team knows what they're doing, but I have no idea. I really don't, and I'm trying to follow a situation. I can't even give you my best pick. Like, it's such a bad situation as it is. Not a fantastic team. No certainty of anything. Frank Stampfel in NL Labor took 3 out of the 4 for all cheap, but he's like, well, I got 3 out of 4. What the hell?
He took 3 from those 4?
Yeah, 3 out of the 4.
No, I meant 3 from the 4 you listed because I would if I'm taking a late dart, I'm throwing it on Castro or McGough.
Okay.
Yeah.
The guys you listed, I'm not even thinking about.
Yeah, Miguel Castro, he has that 97-mile-an-hour fastball. He can close. The other guys, they're shaky when they're in that role, while Castro has pitched for both New York teams, so he can pitch under pressure. So I think he may actually be a better fit.
Yeah, and I'm thinking working with Strom. I mean, if we remember, Ryan Presley got to Houston as a guy with strikeout stuff, but his command wasn't always there. And Strom he tweaked his arsenal and he turned Presley's career around. And if you're hoping that happens, then if that does take with Castro and he has shown better command this spring, I'm not going to go results, but he's throwing strikes, and that's going to be a key for his success. So that's why I'm saying Castro or McGough. McGough saved 30-something games in the NPB last year, so he's trying to take the Robert Suarez path to relevance in the majors.
You would stay away from all these guys, though, right?
Yes,
mixed or shallow, right? Mixed 15.
Yeah, in a mixed, in a 12 team, I'm not going in there. In a 15, I'll take a dart on one of the 2 I said, but if they're not doing it early, I'll just drop them and move on.
Got it. All right. What about Oakland? Another team that's not going to win a lot of games. Trevor May, former Met. Adios, I guess. You got Danny Jimenez, Jackson, Acevedo. May got paid, so do they give it to him because he's already paid for it? What's your take?
Yeah, Trevor May is the highest paid guy in Oakland.
Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
He's getting $7 million.
It's like not even close. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. I think their payroll tripled when they signed him. It didn't make any sense. Why are they signing a $7 million quote unquote closer when they need everything else?
I think they just wanted a veteran in the bullpen. The Cubs did that the last couple of years. They went out and got a couple of veterans to help the young guys understand how to handle those leverage situations. I think best case scenario is he gets like 12 saves and then they flip him at the trade deadline.
Got it. It's a flip situation.
And also, Trevor May is from the West Coast. He is from Seattle, so that's why he went there.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yes. Interesting. Yeah, the nicest thing about Trevor May is that right after the Mets won every game, he would be tweeting, "Let's go Mets." So if you follow him on Twitter, then get ready for a "Let's go A's," I guess, every time they win. So there you go. Miami, another situation. They brought in Matt Barnes. They got Floro. They got Scott. They traded for AJ Puck. Puck will presumably not start. He will be in the bullpen. Does that mean they traded for their closer? Or are they going to go with Floro, who has closed? Well, Matt Barnes has definitely done it, but he walks the farm. What are they doing in Miami?
Schumacher said that they're going to start with a matchup-based approach, but if I'm going for skills, I'll take a late dart on Puck and see what happens. They do have Scott that can pitch to lefties, and Scott's probably better served just facing lefty parts of the lineup, not being he was just overused last year. It set him up for failure. He struggles with command. He got 20 saves, but with a 1.6 whip. So I would take a chance with Puck, hope he stays healthy, and hope that he throws his slider more, because if he does, he can get more strikeouts, but we need him to do those things. Hopefully Stottlemyre will get him to do that.
The only caveat with that, though, is that Dylan Floro has been the number 2 guy to close for the last couple of years, and the Marlins continue to seem to use him in the closer role.
New manager.
There is, it's. I think it has to do with that. But now there's a new manager there, so everything changes a little bit. I like Puck, but I don't think the A's ever used him as closer just because he was a lefty. They used Dennis Jimenez when Puck was there. Puck breaks down a lot, though. That's the problem. He has to stay healthy. If he can stay healthy, then he can close. But otherwise, if you want the safer one, the guy who stays healthy, that's Dylan Floro.
But Floro missed most of last year.
Besides last year, but Puck.
I don't think there's any safe option in the Miami bullpen. I just said if I'm throwing a late dart, I'm putting it on Duck. Puck. I'm putting it on the skills guy. I'm not. Yeah, you could be right, Ruvain. Floro can end up leading the team in saves, and that's okay. It's just pick your poison in these sorts of bullpens. Unfortunately,
yeah, that's right.
I'm going with the duck approach, and I'm just going to duck the situation.
Attaboy.
Let's go with that. But here's the situation I don't think you should duck. Philadelphia, who are the reigning National League champions, and they signed a pretty good guy, might I say Hall of Famer, in Craig Kimbrell. They've got Dominguez. They traded, and they didn't have to, but they traded for Gregory Soto. They also have Alvarado, who has shown some good stuff. Any one of them could be the closer, to be honest with you. What will they do in Philadelphia? I don't really have a good read on this. Greg?
Well, Rob Thompson said that they're going to use a quotation marks floating closer, which means it's matchup-based approach. He was comfortable doing it when he took over for Girardi, and unless injury happens or somebody just comes out and is dominant, even Thompson said, unless somebody just distances himself from the pack, that it'll be shared situations through the season. So, you can take somebody and hope they get 15 saves, but that might be the cap. Unless, Kimbrell's ties to Dombrowski, give him a shot at it. I just, same deal. If I'm going skills, it's Dominguez or Alvarado. But I'm not gonna get many Phillies on my teams.
So is it worth taking like an Alex Lang from Detroit rather than getting, Kimbrell? I mean, you have to pay more for Lang this year, but
I do, but he's younger and has more strikeout upside. I'd rather get and hope for 20 saves from Lang than whatever I'm going to get from Kimbrell.
Right, and you'd still take Duran of Minnesota over any of these guys, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, the Philly situation for me is a little bit odd because Kimbrell, wherever he's gone, he's only closed. When he tried to pitch the 8th inning, he was not that good at it, which makes me think that they're going to try to have him pitch the 9th. And last year, toward the end of the season, Rob Thompson was using Seranthony Dominguez in all the high leverage situations, not necessarily to close, but the high leverage, which means he felt that he was the best guy in the bullpen. I still think he is the best guy, and he happens to be another guy that I drafted in my TGFBI team, because I know he's not going to get a full amount of saves, but having those 3 guys, having Helsley, Duran with half a save, with more than half a save, and having Seranthony Dominguez, you're not blowing the budget out, and at the same time, you're getting good quality or middle relievers if you're not getting the saves.
Yeah, I tend to give Kimbrell an extra buck or so because of that. I mean, we're not talking about just any person. I mean, he's floating around. Hey, I'm Craig Kimbrell, and I've had all these saves. And oh, you want me to come here and take a save share on a National League pennant-winning team? That sounds great. I mean, he probably could have gone anywhere and been the closer. I would assume that's what he would want to do, or maybe he just wants the bigger money. I don't know, but I will give him the nod for more likely to get saves.
Excuse me if I can just interject. My concern here is the Dodgers are one of the best teams at taking a pitcher and making them better, and they couldn't make Kimbrel better.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And the Phillies have the opposite. They make the pitcher worse, especially when it comes to the bullpen. That's just the way it's been.
All right, just a couple situations left, and thanks for going all the way around the league with us. I think this is very helpful to our listeners. Chicago Cubs. You got Hughes. They imported Fulmer. There's also Boxberger, who certainly has experience. You got Albert Alzolay, who has some good stuff. New manager, wide open, but is it Hughes?
No. He's the only lefty.
Fulmer.
Yeah, same deal. If I'm throwing a late dart, it's on Michael Fulmer. He's tweaked his arsenal. He's one of these guys that's adding the sweeper. I think we feel like Fulmer's old, but he's really not. And he's on a 1-year deal. I think he's like their Robertson this year, where they'll use him as a primary save share, and if they're contending, they'll keep him, and if they're not in contention, they'll flip him to a contender and move on to the next guy.
And the Mets could have had him, but they traded him for Yoenis Cespedes.
But that worked out. That did work out. They did get him to the World Series. You can't knock that.
Yeah, I wouldn't be disappointed about that.
Nope. And now Cespedes is on Cuba facing Matt Harvey against Italy. So there you go. All right. Last situation, and we really talked about this one already. The Dodgers. Any of these guys. I've taken Phillips in 2 leagues already because I like his stuff, and even if he's not the guy, he still gets some percentage of save share, and he's a good pitcher. Hudson, I don't like taking guys, especially on in the NFBC style where there's no IL. I don't like taking guys who are on the IL. Like, I just don't like doing it. You're wasting a very precious spot. So I haven't been taking Hudson or so. I don't know. What are your takes? Do you like Gratterall, Phillips? So how would you buy the this situation? Which, by the way, Dodgers, they're not as good as they were last year, I don't think, but they should still be good and should offer, especially with the pitcher's park, a lot of save opportunities.
Mm-hmm. If you're taking Phillips as a second or third reliever on your team for the ratios and 10 saves, then he's fantastic. I think they'll try Hudson early, and if he's not doing well, when Reyes comes back, they're going to try him. I think it's just going to be a churn. That's what makes me nervous. So if you want to get one of those guys, you can. But as you were intimating, I prefer having any of them in the league where there is an IL spot, not necessarily chewing up a spot on if I have a 7-person bench, I don't want one of them sitting there.
All right, before we do the Ruvain's injury update, which I'm sure there's a lot of injuries, any final thoughts? Because we really went through every single situation, and hopefully the listener got a good idea of what to do, not to do, our thoughts on the closers themselves. Greg's thoughts for the most part, of course, because Greg, and by the way, I just want to recommend Reliever Recon. Greg, you do a fantastic job. And, I was mentioning earlier, how do you know to get Griffin Jacks and all that? That's what your site sort of does, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe we want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's $5 a month, but it's basically, if you go to Dunkin' Donuts, that's a sandwich and a coffee. So it's not that expensive for, I put out at least usually one post a day. I update the closer charts in real time. I'm tracking spring training, strike percentages, swinging strike rates when StatCast is available. Anyways, it's just we have a podcast that's once a week from Nate and Aaron. If you play in a head-to-head league, our bullpen guru, he puts out posts on what he calls a fruit, which is the first reliever out of the pen to vulture those wins. So like teams where a starter might only go 4 innings, he identifies the guy that's going to come in after that might swoop in and grab those wins. Those are hugely important head-to-head formats. We get work every now and again from Eric, but it's just we focus on relievers, and We try and do all the dirty work for you. So when it comes down to your free agent decisions, you should have a real firm idea of who you're targeting and what you're going to do. It's, I put a lot of work into this, and it bears itself out in the closer charts and all the information that we put forth. And again, that's why last year people who subscribed to Recon were getting Daniel Bard and Ryan Helsley before the rest of their league mates.
Yep, totally agree, and I do recommend it. I am a subscriber myself. Any final thoughts, Ruvain? Otherwise, it's your injury report.
I'll go straight into the injury report because I actually have some possible darts in the injury report. I'll start with TJ Antone, the guy who used to close for the Reds. He had Tommy John surgery in 2021, and he was slowed in his offseason throwing program because of a right forearm injury. He made an announcement on his Instagram account that he had a PRP injection for his flexor strain in his right elbow, and it should keep him out for half a year, so don't roster him just yet. Another guy you may want to keep on your radar, former Nationals closer, Sean Doolittle. Sean Doolittle is not supposed to be ready for opening day because he did have surgery on his UCL. He had an internal brace procedure similar to what Bryce Harper had, similar to what Rhys Hoskins had, and he's not going to be ready for opening day, so it did slow down his rehab process, but he's somebody, if Kyle Finnegan can't hold that job, he may slide into that closer role because they like him there in Washington. Another guy you may want to have just on your radar, Trevor Rosenthal for the Tigers. They signed him late. He had a lat injury last year. He said he's 100%, but because he signed so late, manager AJ Hinch said he's not going to be ready for when opening day starts. But he's a guy just to have on your radar. Keep watch and see how Lang does, just in case you want to take that dart on Rosenthal. We mentioned Daniel Hudson. He had ACL surgery last year. He was scheduled to face live hitters this week. He will probably not be ready for opening day. Look for a mid-April return for him.
All right. A lot of great stuff here. Greg, what else you got going other than Reliever Recon? I know you do stuff at The Athletic. I want to just tell everybody where they can read you, follow your work, and everything, all things Greg Jewett.
Well, again, first, thank you for the kind words about Recon and the work. I greatly appreciate it, and you're obviously one of the best competitors in our tout league, and I respect all the work that you and Ruvain do with this great show, and it's just awesome. So, anywho, I will have, The Athletic asked me to do an article the other day on 7 relievers past pick 100. I use Fantasy Pros ADP just so it's, I don't want to. Sometimes I feel like I'm too NFBC centric, so I have to expand my horizons. That I also, when I get done recording this, I have to go downstairs and do a closers ranking for them that's due to be published. So I'll probably be up to about 2-3 in the morning, and then go teach. But it's okay, I get used to it. So in season, the Athletic article runs on Tuesdays. I cover saves. I also have solds tiered rankings as a part of my things because I know more leagues are shifting to solds as opposed to traditional saves, and the reliever recon stuff that keeps me very busy, but also keeps me young, and allows me to keep growing with my passion for fantasy baseball. So I appreciate you guys having me on, and hopefully it'll expose a couple of new people to our site.
Of course, and thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule to be on our show. I had a good time with you here, and I think some really, really great stuff. And if you're playing me the playoffs this year in Tatworth, please take a dive. Thanks.
I took a dive the year before when I had Chapman active. That's why I got off him so fast.
Okay, I'm kidding. I would never.
I
ask,
know.
I would never ask somebody.
No. Hope you're a fierce competitor, but I enjoy it. It makes me better. So it's all good.
I might hand you money, but I'm not gonna ask you just that. I'm a gentleman about it. All right, just kidding. All right, Ruvain, what about you?
You can follow me on Twitter at MLB Injury Guru, where I tweet out injury updates as they come. Next man up. I also have an in-season article which will start the first week of the season discussing all these injuries on Rotobowler. And also, I believe our next podcast, we will be discussing injuries, just injuries, I believe. Isn't that correct, Ariel?
Yeah, it's going to be the Ruvain special here, where we'll just let Ruvain go. I'll chime in and ask some pointed questions, but yeah, Ruvain will put together all the injuries you should know about. We'll get that out for you. So looking forward to that. Yeah, and again, I want to apologize about my hoarse voice. I had to decide, is this above the acceptable level of you listen to him anyways, or should we just scrap this podcast? I think it was above the level of, all right, not the greatest voice, but we'll hear it. Do you guys agree?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think the throat exercises you did before the show actually really, really helped.
Yeah, Ruby and I should have been taping those and putting them on Twitter. That was a mistake. I should have had that. That could have been my collateral when you wanted me to take a dive and tout.
It was gold. It was gold.
All right. I won't do that for you guys, but that was some fun stuff. My voice was a lot worse before then, but yeah. All right. That's it. I'm Ariel Cohen, ATCNY on Twitter, Fangraphs, Rotoballer. Check out my stuff. Beat the Shift podcast each and every week. And we'll do one or two more, I should say, preseason podcasts to get you ready for the season. All right, good luck drafting, everybody. Once again, thank you so much to Greg Jewett for coming on and going through the entire universe of closers with everybody. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Beat the Shift podcast presented by Fangraphs. Follow us on Twitter at beat_shift_pod.